Okay, it's about 11:30. I think we'll start getting started here. Many of you probably know me. I'm Graham Watkins, formerly a researcher at the Rhine Institute. My background, however, is my formal education is in zoology. And so I will be presenting the cryptozoological material from the viewpoint of zoology. And the tack that I take as a rule is to decide, look at these cases, go through the various reports that we have and try to decide what best explains what is being reported. Sometimes what best explains what's being reported is simple error, but however it falls. My companion today is Joe Nickell, who is perhaps the world's only full-time paranormal investigator. He works for CSI. He's part of the Skeptic track, and will be taking, to an extent, the opposite point of view from me, but in some cases I think we may agree on things. I have a slideshow presentation. Some of you may want to pull up a little in front, and I'll turn the computer around again. We had 2 years ago, we did the same thing. I had the same sort of presentation, and the tech ops did not show up with the projector then either, so I'm sorry. The only thing I can do is turn the screen around, and you can start discussing some of the things that are there, and you can see as well as you can. Yeah, well, the screen's fairly bright. If you just got to be closer, you're not going to be able to see much of anything. It ain't that big.
It's not true.
Anyway, while I'm getting that set up, let me turn it over to Joe, and let him give you a statement of what he's going to talk about today.
I should tell you that Graham and I are old college buddies, so and haven't seen each other for these many years, which we've gotten a little grizzled. But I call myself a skeptical cryptozoologist, or skeptical, ghost hunter, skeptical ufologist. As opposed to, I resent and resist the term debunker. I'm called that a lot, even sometimes by skeptics who think they're flattering me. Oh, he's a noted debunker. And I don't use that term because I think it suggests that you're biased, that you have some agenda. And I'm trying to steer away from true belief and debunking and steer right in between. I am a former stage magician and a former detective for a famous detective agency, and a PhD in English literature and folklore, and I am really trying to investigate. And if any debunking is needed, I think once you explain something, offer the best explanation, any needed debunking will just take care of itself. So that's the spirit in which I investigate the paranormal.
Just a suggestion, if you could put that on one of the speakers, more of us could see it, if you got a cord that goes that long. Or if you trust it, yeah.
Could you move that microphone, the middle microphone?
This is going to keep running on the battery, so we will do just that.
What's that? Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me grab a microphone here. And I'm going to run through some of the early stuff on this fairly fast, and so we can get to the stuff that's more of interest.
Just a little bit.
No, that's not going to work. I'm getting in front of the speaker. I know better than that. All right, the first thing is that this is a term that has come into vogue lately, the Lazarus species. The Lazarus species, that's kind of self-evident, is one that is thought to have been extinct, but has been rediscovered. The coelacanth latimeria is fairly famous in that respect. This one was rediscovered in the 1990s. It was well known from Pleistocene fossil evidence. It's the largest of the American pigs, the Chacoan peccary. Quite a bit larger than the colored peccary that lives down in Texas, or the white-lipped from the Amazon jungles. But it's turned up in Paraguay. The pygmy tarsier was assumed to be extinct recently. That's a very interesting picture, but you can't see it that well. Monopelcophorans are mollusks that are single-shelled and live on the ocean bottom. They're only of interest to zoologists like myself. The Gracillidoris ant been rediscovered after having been known from amber evidence from quite ancient times. These animals at one time were considered in the same way as the Yeti and Loch Ness and Bigfoot are today. They were assumed to be not real. The okapi from Africa, the only living relative of the giraffes, lives in the deep forest. Was not known until the late 1800s that it actually existed. It was considered to be a native legend. The Boral is the blue Himalayan sheep, which was sacred to the Buddhists in Nepal and Tibet, and was long considered to be completely a mythic animal until an expedition of Nazi scientists in World War II brought back specimens of it. You can now see it in a bunch of zoos. It's a perfectly ordinary animal. The rainbow water snake from Southeast Asia was considered mythological, but the most dramatic and the one that I like to talk about a lot is the orangutan. If you listen to stories about the wild man of Borneo in 1890, you would be hearing stories very much like what you hear about Bigfoot and Yeti today. And you would be hearing the same sort of poo-pooing from various waters as to the such things couldn't actually exist. But the orangutan is a perfectly familiar animal to us now. There are many large mammals and large animals in general still remain to be discovered. All of these that you're going to see now have been discovered or rediscovered since 1990. This is a very large rodent from the high Andes. That's from Southeast Asia. The Aleutian rock rat is from Southeast Asia. The Aleutian rock rat is, oops, I'm not going the right direction. I'm used to doing it this way. This Combes is large guinea pig size. Okay? The Aleutian rock rat, you can see it sitting on someone's hand here. So they're fairly large and they're behaviorally odd. You can simply go out into the woods and pick it. If you find one, it'll just sit there and look at you and you pick it up. This was discovered in the 1990s. Also, this is a fairly large ox that was from Vietnam. Still not thought to. And nobody knew what to think of it. It had been reported by the Vietnamese many times, but nobody ever seen it. The same thing with this small deer, although there are several deer of this sort in Southeast Asia. This is a species that we still don't know what it exactly is, that was caught by a trap camera in Indonesia some years back, and it's unknown from there. It looks very much like, if you can see it here, it looks very much like the jaguarundi, which lives in South America.
That's a mammal?
It's a mammal. It's a cat, actually. The jaguarundi is a cat. And the initial question that people ask is that how could you possibly have two animals, one in South America, one in Indonesia, that look almost identical like these two seem to? And of course the answer to that is what's called convergent evolution. This is, the example here is an emerald tree boa from South America and a green tree python from Indonesia. As you can see, they're so identical that you have to be expert to tell them apart. The way that they are, how close they are, how similar they are, is not fully not fully obvious from that pair of pictures. They coil the same way. They both go through a phase as juveniles where they're both bright red. But they're not the same. One of them, the emerald tree boa, for instance, is a live bear, and the python, they lays eggs. These are others that have been discovered recently. We didn't believe polar bears and grizzly bears could hybridize. They're supposed to be different genera, and different genera are not supposed to be able to hybridize, but this one they do. The Indonesian expedition brought forth a number of new animals, new birds, so on. And these All these sharks have been rediscovered recently. You may have seen a movie on Sci-Fi Channel featuring our little goblin sharks, which could be dangerous, but the behavior shown in that movie is kind of ridiculous for them.
Shocking.
Huh?
Shocking.
Yes. This little reef fish creates quite a stir because we really did think we knew all of those species. And we really felt we had known all those species for a very long time. But this one turned up less than 10 years ago. Brand new one. All these are new species, sometimes fairly close variants of what we've already known, and sometimes very different, like this one, from anything we've known so far. They all turned up on beaches after the tsunami, the Christmas tsunami in Indonesia a few years ago. There are quite a number of those that turned up from that. It's too bad you can't see them better. This is a chimera, which is a relative of the sharks. It's one of the three groups of chondrichthyans. These are Madagascar spiders that have been recently discovered. Cytodes, you can't really see them very well in there, but they're interesting in that they don't look that odd. They wouldn't, if one was crawling across the table, you wouldn't pay much notice. There's this little spider. But Cytodes is the only first spider that has been discovered that is social and attacks a larger animal, larger creatures, quite a bit larger than itself, as a group. Most spiders don't do this. These hunt in little packs.
Oh, good.
Yeah. What's the assassin spider?
The assassin spider is specialized to eat other spiders. You can see that the chelicerae are very long and they're armored, so they can't be bitten by the food that they're eating. Spitting scorpions have been discovered in South Africa some years ago. You can now buy them from Glades Herp if you want to, as less pets. Africa is, of course, well known for spitting cobras, which spit venom at your eyes very accurately, I might add, from a very great distance. This little guy is a scorpion, and it also spits and can make about 7 or 8 feet of venom spitting, and also aims for your eyes. Well, you can buy them as pets if you want. Such a pet. The six-eyed sand spider, modern is interesting. I threw it in here because modern tests show that this is an African species also, and tests have shown that this possibly has the strongest venom of any known spider, quite a bit stronger than the Brazilian wandering spider, which causes quite a few deaths every year, and stronger than the Atrax, the famous Atrax spiders of Australia. But we really don't know because, as far as anybody knows, none of them have ever bitten anybody. These are marine crustaceans that have turned up with the tsunami. New species of crustaceans. New octopi that have been seen, in some of them very weird. This one has been named the Dumbo octopus for kind of obvious reasons. The vampire squid was discovered maybe 15 years ago. Very unusual looking creature with a wonderful name, Vampoteuthis infernalis. The two giant squids now, of course, we have with those so-called giant squid and colossal squid, which are the squids, of course, are pretty much identical with the mythological kraken, were once considered cryptids, were once mythological, unknown. This is one actual photograph of a giant squid. And we also have these, which have become of interest lately. Humboldt's is a large squid. If you see the picture here, the ones in the picture are 6 or 7 feet long. They get to be 10 or 12. These are not terribly large. They also tend to hunt in packs. They have been known to attack divers. They're very aggressive. They're also quite intelligent. And they once lived almost exclusively off the coast of Mexico, mostly in the Gulf of Cortez, and for reasons that a lot of people assume have to do with global warming, but we're not really sure at the moment. They're moving northward along the Pacific coast. They're now fairly abundant off Washington State, but they're definitely expanding in the Pacific. These created some attention a few years ago. They were claimed to be real. They're not real. These are photoshopped pictures, but I left them in there because they did convince a lot of people, but they have turned out to be photoshopped pictures. All right. The chupacabra.
What's favorite?
Huh?
Favorite.
Chupacabra reports from all over the place indicate an animal that looks odd, but often is described as somewhat doggish. The ones that have turned up dead, people have killed, do look like some sort of canid. And this is this one here in particular. That's the Tycho fox. It lives near Lake Tycho in North Carolina, and it has been living there for at least 10 years now, and is seen commonly enough. You can actually find it and photograph it. It's completely hairless. Looks very odd because it's completely hairless. The gums are deformed, so it looks like it's fanged. And it's not a very effective hunter, but in lack of competition, it manages. This is turned out that there's a specific gene that dogs, wolves, coyotes, foxes, etc. can have, called the Samson gene, which produces this kind of thing. It produces a deformed and distorted looking animal that is basically hairless, and because of its deformities, it is not a terribly good hunter, which might lead it very well to prey on livestock. These are at least one of the reported chupacabras that some farmer had killed and was actually investigated by a laboratory has turned out to be a coyote with the Samson gene. So that might be, we almost might call that a solved issue. The main mystery beast is probably a dog, maybe a dog wolf hybrid. It killed quite a large number of dogs in the area before being hit by a car. These photographs exist, but somebody carried the body off, so we didn't get any hard evidence of exactly what it was. All right. Now let's go to the Loch Ness Monster, which is, I think, the Loch Ness is representative of, and I do want to turn this over to you in a second and let you talk about this a bit too. The Loch Ness is representative of a large number around the world of lake monsters. Lake Champlain and Ongopongo in the United States, there's Loch Ness. I think the only major lake that I've heard of that sort that I've never heard of one from is Lake Baikal. But they seem to be in a lot of different places, and the reports are often frequent. They stretch back over a long period of time. Some of them, like Loch Ness, have been thoroughly investigated. People have set down submersibles and they've done sonar and all kinds of things looking for Loch Ness through Nessie, and nothing turns up. Popularly, like in the sci-fi movies, the animal is presented as a possible surviving plesiosaur. You have to say that's pretty much out of the question, because a plesiosaur is an air breather. They have to come to the surface periodically to breathe, and with the tens of thousands of people that are constantly swarming over Loch Ness looking for the monster, it'd be seen and photographed a lot more often than it is if it was something like that. I read a proposal recently that that one of the lake monsters was a surviving zoeglodon, which is a prehistoric whale, very, very long and serpentine with fangy teeth. That's highly unlikely for the same reason. These are air breathers. They have to come to the surface on a regular basis. They have to. They certainly can't hide from sonar if you're doing sonar on a lake. So the likelihood of the Loch Ness or any of these other lake monsters being surviving plesiosaurs or zoeglodons or anything like that is really remote. But I'm going to make a suggestion in a moment as to what they might be. Do you want to discuss this a little bit first before I go on with my suggestion?
Sure. I've done a lot of investigations of lake monsters. Everybody hear me all right?
Yeah.
Somebody's got a hand raised in the back.
Give him thumbs up.
Oh,
Thumbs up.
I don't know if I have any cord here to stand.
It's stuck.
Hmm?
It's too short.
They're taped in.
Yeah, they're taped to one more.
This one work?
They all work, but
No, I mean, so I can stand.
Yeah, that one's long.
all right. Sorry.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
Okay, no. We rehearsed this comedy act. And thank you for laughing. Okay, you can at least see me now. I've been investigating lake monsters for many years. I've gone off on expeditions with National Geographic, who, for example, Lake Okanagan in British Columbia, provided us with a seaplane, a large boat with side-scanning sonar, a diving team, put me in a very nice hotel, and even paid my bar tab, which, as you can imagine, was extensive. But I've traveled also with Monster Quest and others, and on my own, looking at Lake Champlain, Lake Memphremagog, and many others. And I have some ideas about the monsters that are seen in lakes. Many of these lakes are not very old. They're left over from the last ice age and about 10,000 years old. The idea of a plesiosaur somehow getting in there would be problematic. But when I went with Monster Quest to Newfoundland, to Crescent Lake, looking for the fabled Cressy, I was interested in the idea there, popularly, that it was a giant eel. Now, there are eels in the area, but a giant eel, maybe 30 feet long or so. People were describing a long-necked serpentine creature swimming like this at a great length. And this is just not something that we know about. And I'm not one to dismiss people, to suggest that people are drunk or stupid or whatever is not my approach, as many of you know. I'm an investigator, not a dismisser and debunker. And I met many credible people over the years describing this similar kind of creature in many, many lakes, and I believe they've seen something. I'm here to tell you today, I believe there is a creature that looks like that. So does it seem that I've quit being a skeptic? Not really. I'm going to give you the name of the creature that I believe is responsible for many of these sightings. Now, I've been accused of suggesting that this explains all lake monsters. It does not. Some don't fit the description I just gave you. Some are floating logs, some are beavers, some are, schools of fish, seiche effects, whatever. But there is a creature, and its name is Lontra canadensis, the northern river otter. Now you're saying back there, oh, but otters are not that big. That's right, one otter isn't. But when they play follow the leader, a game well known to otters, you can imagine that they can create, swimming more or less in sync, this serpentine effect. I didn't make this up. I have now found as far as early as the 1930s when this was actually observed in Scotland. I have personally now found two people, one a wildlife expert who actually saw, hiding in a duck blind on Lake Alice in New York, saw this humongous serpentine creature come toward him, and he said, it's just astonishing what you see, but then you figure it out. Or I saw a guy who was looking, who was in the area of Vancouver Island looking down from a bluff and saw the sea serpent, the Cadborosaurus, they call it, caddy. And he watched caddy swim, this multi-humped creature swim up to the shore, and then, of course, out came some otters. It's an astonishing effect. And so for Monster Quest, I spent a lot of time studying giant eels, courtesy of Aquarium Niagara, where I'm a member and was once animal trainer for a day. And neither I nor the animals got hurt, and I think that's something to be thankful for. But they humored me and let me examine their large eels. They have a giant moray eel, for example. It did not want to come out and play. So they had to poke it. And it was, if you can imagine a moray eel, just with an angry expression. Maybe I'm projecting a little bit. It did not look like a happy camper, and out it came. Yeah, I think so. I think so. But I thought it was particularly angry. It kept looking at me, I thought. And you find out pretty quickly they don't swim like this. They swim like this. It's a very different effect. They are not swimming on the surface of the water. They are bottom feeders, and they are not out in the day when people are watching. They're nocturnal. So that's pretty much 3 strikes against giant eels, and I think a very good possibility that people were seeing otters. I've published a map of just North America showing basically lake and river monster sightings, and then overlaying it with otter population. Wow. And of course at Loch Ness you have the large European otter, Lantra. Or is it Lutra? It's still Lutra, but it used to be Lutra canadensis, now it's Lantra canadensis is the new.
But it's still Lutra.
Still Lutra, okay. And the most recent Loch Ness sighting I believe, was just one otter, and it was swimming in this fashion. It looked longer, but only because of the wake. When we looked at it frame by frame very carefully, and it's awfully grainy and blurry, but as best we could tell, it was not a big creature. And I'll stop there. That's an introduction to my thoughts about lake monsters.
Let me.
Oh, I can't keep that.
I'll give it back. I promise.
Okay.
The one thing that, from a biological point of view, is that anytime you see or you get reported an animal that is swimming in the water like this, something is wrong. Because nothing swims like that. Nothing we know of or have ever known. Snakes swim side to side. Eels swim side to side. Most worms that swim side to side. Everything swims side to side. A number of, besides the otters, which he's already mentioned, a number of sea serpent sightings have been identified now because dolphins do that. They will do that. They'll follow the leader where they're coming in and out of the water in a long string of them, and sometimes quite a long string of them. And from a distance, when it's raining, if you've had a little too much grog, it really does look like a serpent. I do want to address one other possibility for lake monsters, though. This is a famous fake for Loch Ness. This one is supposed to be real. That sort of thing is probably not an otter, unless an otter's tail sticking up out of the water bit at the tip. But why, if we have something that's fairly large, and let me divert here just for a second. It's something we were talking about just before the panel started, on the size of things. Whenever you hear reports of this, you can assume that the size is exaggerated. However large they say it is, it ain't that big. I had an experience. I used to hunt snakes a lot out in the woods. And one of my favorite areas was Francis Marion Forest down in South Carolina, where there were in 1970s and 1980s a lot of diamondbacks. And I came across a diamondback one day and toward twilight, and eventually I caught this diamondback and measured her. If I had not caught her and measured her, she measured 8 feet 7 inches. If I had not caught her and measured her, and I came to you and told you about this today, I would have sworn she was 25 feet. She looked 25 feet, because I wasn't expecting her where she was, and I would have sworn she was 25 feet long and, 3 feet in diameter. And I'm experienced with them. But she sure did look gigantic to me when I first saw her. And she's still pretty big. I mean, she's this big around, but within the known range of the species. But I would like to propose that if you don't see anything by sonar, if you don't see anything visually in the water, and you only see an occasional break at the surface, what we might be looking at, and this is again fitting it, there's no particular evidence for this, but this is fitting it to the sightings. We might be looking at some unrecognized species of worm. This is a melanoglossid worm. and this is an acorn worm, which is closely related. These are marine. They are not terribly small. Some of them get to be 8 feet long, although they're very slender. And they are rarely seen because what they do is they eat dirt. They burrow in the bottom, they crawl through the bottom, and they sift nutrients out of the soil. They almost never come out of the soil. The only way you find marine ones is by dredging. You could actually, if you had this sort of thing living in Loch Ness, then you could actually drain the lake and look at the bottom, and you still would never see it because it's 6 or 8 feet down in the muck at the bottom of the lake. The only time they ever come out is when they're in trouble in some way, or sometimes in the breeding season. This is kind of rejected now. There was a big stir a few years ago by somebody claiming he found the Loch Ness monster tooth. The tooth he's presenting is part of a deer antler. It's not a tooth at all. That's kind of obvious to anybody. But the Loch Ness monster might look much like this. Now, what that is a Photoshop picture done by me showing a melanoglossid worm from marine, from swimming in the way that they do swim, right? Except I've transferred it into Loch Ness. Okay? And it does look sort of like the slightly humped back. This is not for the worm. This is not the head. This is the proboscis. The head is here. What they do is they extend this proboscis. They expand the tip, and then they pull it back. They pull it back in, and therefore pull the body forward. And do this repeatedly. Why they're called anchor worms, or at times, or acorn worms, because sometimes that head looks like an acorn. But if they are up swimming around, looking for nice female worms, they may look like this, because that may be waving around because it's seeking something to grab onto. This has been seen in lagoons. It's very rare for a marine one. But if we had a large freshwater species, if that were the case, it would fit just about all the facts that we currently have on these things. Any questions on Loch Ness and the lake? Before we go on. Yes, sir.
Well, the first question regarding if that's a lake monster, is there enough food in the lake to sustain a creature like that?
That's an excellent question, and in some cases that's obviously not. Obviously you're going. If you had something like a plesiosaur, I would expect it to decimate some of these lakes in very short order, or the much higher metabolism zooplankton, which is just almost a ridiculous suggestion. Because of the high metabolism, this animal, it would eat everything.
Right. Clearly, you can't have one Loch Ness monster. You have to have a breeding population, and for the creatures to survive. And once you postulate a whole population, then the question is why we don't eventually find a carcass floating on the surface, or better evidence. And BBC financed an expedition that went end to end, side to side with sonar, and did not find such a creature. I'm sometimes told, as regarding my multiple otters hypothesis, sometimes people will say, well, there are no otters in this lake. I've had locals say that, because that's true. Otters don't live in the lake. They're river otters, basically, and they go picnicking at the lake. So they're there occasionally, and they only have to picnic once every few years to keep the myth of the lake monster alive. Anyway, I realize there are other explanations for lake monsters, but I'm convinced that many of the good reports that I've come across are best explained, because I use Occam's razor, that the simplest explanation, the one that we know they're otters, we know they go picnicking in the lake, we know they play follow the leader, we know they look very, very much. And I'm trying to collect more eyewitnesses who have seen that illusion of the otters playing at sea monster. But
I've seen plenty of otters. I've never actually seen them do that. I have seen that effect with dolphins.
Yes, and for sea serpents, I think the dolphin explanation is better.
Yeah.
How large would the worm have to be in your Photoshop?
Well, these worms are known to grow to, in the marine species, grow to be as much as 6 to 8 feet long. Okay? If you have one 20 feet long that's living in fresh water, then certainly when people see that, it's serpentine. You know, it swims oddly. It looks like it has this rather threatening head. That's not a head, but that's what it looks like. And it would make a great impression on people. And if it was 20 feet long, they'd probably see it as 60, based on what I just said with the same sort of thing with the diamondback. But the thing is that there's another issue here too, and that is that these animals in the marine environment, they're heavily preyed upon by things like crabs that dig around in the muck. And in a lake like Loch Ness, that sort of fauna is not there. So they may simply be, there are large numbers of animals that continue to grow as long as they live. And for instance, in colonial times, 20 and 25 foot alligators in Florida were not rare. We have quite a number of skins and whatnot of alligators that well over 20 feet. But nobody's seen a 20-foot alligator for over 100 years. This is because this is not an unusual thing. This is not a different species. It's just an old alligator. They keep growing as long as they keep living. Yes, sir. I have a question in the back.
I actually have a question about that. This is something I read about the interest me.
Can you come up? Can you come up? I can't hear you.
The question I had, like I said, I read this ages ago, and it was interesting to me, was that they apparently were documented records of eel larvae that were of impressive size, green eel larvae. And I was wondering your thoughts on that. Both of you see the article and subject, and how it relates to maybe like YouTube or something like that. I don't know, just interesting.
Yes,
right.
There are. Let me address one thing, and I'll give that to you. There are a couple of documented reports. We have those, one of the specimens at least, of eel larvae that have been pulled up primarily off New Zealand, that are clearly the larval form. I don't have a picture of it here, unfortunately, but an eel larva is a leaf, has a broad leaf shape to it. They're very distinct from the adults. They don't look at all like the adults. And these at least 2 of these larvae were pulled up off of New Zealand, which were about 6 feet long, and which doesn't sound huge until you translate the fact that the larvae of the American eel and the common European eel, they start losing the larval form when they're about 3/4 of an inch long, and then they grow into 6 to 8 foot adults. So the direct projection of an eel larva 6 feet long would be an eel probably 200 feet long, certainly a formidable sea serpent. But that's not necessarily so, because other animals don't always do that sort of thing. This animal may reduce to a 6-foot eel. There are known processes like that where the larva reaches a greater size in some animals than it does in others, and you can't necessarily make that projection. It's suggestive. 120-foot eel or 200-foot eel would be a sea serpent worthy of contention, but we have no evidence right now that they do that. They may just stay about that same length and adopt the adult characteristics, as opposed to what the American eel and European eel, conger eel, all do.
But as I say, I would use Occam's razor, the principle that if you have 2 or 3 hypotheses to account for something, the one that makes the fewest assumptions is to be preferred. And we could assume that there are species of eel in all these lakes, and that they grow to humongous proportions, and that they swim in un-eel-like ways and so forth. We could suppose that. I just would think it's simpler to postulate the otters, and I'm waiting for someone to do the overlay of eels onto the lakes of North America. But it really is rather astonishing how well that fits.
Oh, I was just curious.
I got you. I realized you were not arguing for the eels, but just as a hypothetical sort of thing. Thank you.
Eels also are very voracious feeders and would really make an impact on a lake by if they were living there. They're predatory and they're voracious as they can be. I'd be surprised if you could explain an animal like that as an eel. Not to mention the fact that they don't swim like that. No, not ever. Far in the back first.
That word that you're talking about, the marine species, has there been one found in freshwater at all?
No, they're not known from freshwater. That doesn't mean they don't exist there. And there are many other animals that have been known from the marine environment that have turned up with a freshwater form. So that's just an open question. But no, they are not at the moment known to exist in freshwater. Yes, sir.
Yeah, when you're dealing with Lazarus species that disappear, or at least seem to disappear, and then are sighted again, in some of these cases, it presupposes a population so small that it's somehow endured over a long time. And I'm thinking about people who report sightings of Tasmanian tigers and things like that, where I assume that the field is pretty sure that there have been none seen for, this point, 50, 70 years, something like that. In these cases where there is an approach toward confirmation of the existence of these species, is there any hypothesis as to how they've survived with maybe one in every 30 square miles of an island or something like that?
They're probably not surviving like that. And they're probably surviving in very remote areas with a decent-sized population. What you call the Tasmanian tiger, the Thakkaling wolf, right. There is a possibility it still exists. It's not been extinct as long as the ivory-billed woodpecker, and it seems now that there's at least a good possibility. I know that's controversial at the moment, that sighting, but it seems now that in one of the remote swamps in Arkansas, there's a population of ivory bills still existing. That's not out of the. Neither one is out of the question. They could easily turn up if they are living in a remote area, and that, which brings me kind of to the next part of the discussion, which is the Yeti and Bigfoot. These are, of course, two of the two large modern apes that we know about, and both of them were cryptids at one time. That both were not known. It's been a very long time for the gorilla, not such a long time for the orangutan. The Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest, just exactly what I said. The problem here is a population of these of animals like that living in an area like that. That's not that inaccessible. That's a fairly heavily populated area. This is going to have to be something that's extraordinarily elusive, to keep out of sight, for no bodies to have been found. Basically nothing but footprints and a few blurry movies over all this time, and you almost have to say that it's not very likely. Occam's razor, as you say, cuts against that. I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't see how. There's going to almost have to be something with its behavior, or something like that, which explains how it remains so thoroughly hidden. The same is not true of the Yeti. I've often said that the Yeti is the most likely of the major cryptids to exist. The area where it supposedly lives is very remote. There are vast tracts of land there, mountains, where nobody goes, and even quite large animals could live there largely undetected. Especially, the question is, what does it eat in those areas? Now, I have proposed, as far as I know, I was the first person to propose that at Dragon Con a good 10 years ago, that the Yeti might be a survival of Gigantopithecus, which is a Pleistocene giant ape, which well known from China. The Gigantopithecus, if you look at an older book on paleontology, you will see something drawn that looks like a gorilla. This is not correct. It's turned out that Gigantopithecus is very closely related to the orangutan, but drawing it with very long arms, and very short legs like an orang, which is a brick-eating ape. That is an ape that lives in the trees. Almost certainly inaccurate. This is almost certainly an animal that's going to be designed more like us, because it's at a half ton, 10 feet tall. This is not something that can go swinging around in trees very easily, even if there were trees where it lives, which is very possibly in the Himalayas. This center picture here is the scalp of a Yeti that was supposedly given to Sir Edmund Hillary years ago. This is, I believe, identified as a bear, wasn't it, Benjamin?
I thought it was the hump of a cerro.
It might have been.
I believe
it was not. It was not the part of a Yeti.
It was not. And Hillary was became even more skeptical than he had been previously.
But there does exist this intriguing possibility, because this animal does fit, in many ways. If we can figure out what it might eat, that's the biggest. I think that's the biggest problem of the range. This map shows the old original range of the orangutan, which has now been restricted down to Borneo and a small population in Sumatra. But once during the Pleistocene, ranged much further, and Gigantopithecus is shown from this. This is also the range of the panda, which has now also contracted a great deal. The Yeti fossils, the Gigantopithecus fossils, if you want to, have been found from in this whole area up through here. They may have been restricted back to what is now is Tibet. There may be relic populations surviving, and they would fit the bill, especially if they are a very shy and retiring animal, which the orang is. Wild orangs are not aggressive at all. Unlike chimps, which can be. If the Yeti is retiring in that way, it's also an intelligent animal. It would very well find ways to hide. The biggest question remains is what if that is all so, what does it eat?
Can I jump in?
Yes, you can.
Let me borrow your. I'll stand.
Let me not stumble over it this time. I've already done my Bigfoot interpretation.
We enjoyed it the other time when you stumbled. Let me just say a few words about about the idea of Bigfoot. I just came back from a little expedition that I did into Bigfoot country, and hiked for miles back into Bigfoot country near Bluff Creek, where the famous Roger Patterson film was. And I have recently talked to the man who claims to have sold Roger Patterson the gorilla suit, which he modified. I know that's controversial whether he did or not. I have spent some quality time with this gentleman, and I'm prepared to believe his story. I've got a blog entry that may be just posted called "The Man Who Sold Big Suit." So you might want to look at that. But what I want to do is take this in a little different direction, and if you'll humor me for a moment, because I do a lot of studying of myths, and I have a background in folklore, and I've been impressed with, if we define a mythology as supernormal beings interacting with humans in ways that are cosmically important. And I know most of us think of mythologies as something the ancient Greeks and Romans did, or maybe we equate them with some of the world's great religions. But I'm going to suggest to you that we're watching right now, right this minute, before our very eyes, we're watching a couple of vast mythologies develop right here, right now. One is Bigfoot, our sort of, if you'll pardon the expression, our stupid ancestor from the past, big hairy ape man, man-beast, the creatures who's symbolic of endangered species. And here we are on this little endangered planet, and Bigfoot is the very symbol of endangered species. So endangered, he may not exist. I got a bigger laugh with a larger skeptical audience. And at the same time, we're turned looking out now. We're looking out into space. And we're seeing this other mythology, this extraterrestrial, little big-eyed, big-headed humanoid who's a futuristic version of us. because the sort of vestigial body, because we imagine that in the future we wouldn't be lumberjacks and so forth. But the big head, because we're going to be ever so much smarter. This may not comport well with evolutionary biology, but big stupid cousin from the past, futuristic version of us come again with some of the alien abduction people who are, some of whom are fantasy prone, they've been hypnotized, whatever, or have had waking dreams. But they've had messages from the extraterrestrials, again, about the survival of our planet. And I'm just starting now. I find this very interesting and exciting, and I just commend this idea to you to start looking at these. This does not say they don't exist. This is sort of separate. Folklorists are not so much interested in, whether a ghost exists or not, but how the ghost legends are transmitted. But I'm looking at it now just in terms of what it says about our culture and our interest in such things, and they are fascinating ideas. And I just leave you with that thought.
On the other hand, if we're correct about the Yeti or possibly Bigfoot being a survival of Gigantopithecus, then this is just an animal like the gorilla or the orangutan. This is not symbolic of anything. It's not.
But it fascinates us the same.
It does fascinate us. But the last one that we had like this, as I noted, the orangutan, the wild man of Borneo, did turn out to be real. In the back. That side first.
I have three issues with the Gigantopithecus idea.
Okay.
Number one, I think it puts the cart before the horse. It assumes there's a creature there when, to me, that is not necessarily the case. We don't know that for sure. The evidence that is out there, the blurry photographs, the tracks and so forth, it's questionable at best. Second of all, what we know about Gigantopithecus isn't a whole lot. We have bone fragments. The drawings that you see are extrapolations from given information, so we don't know exactly how well the actual Gigantopithecus looks like the Yeti physically. And third thing, largely related to that, you're correct in saying that Gigantopithecus is related to the orangutans. Orangutans are not bipedal, and their evolutionary history, we have no evidence that anybody in their family tree has ever been bipedal. As far as we know, bipedalism in apes has developed exactly once in our lineage, going back to Ardipithecus, not with the Australopithecines, and then ultimately to us with our lower back pain. So to me, these are serious problems, and saying that Yeti or Bigfoot or Yowie or whatever is Gigantopithecus, to me, it is a hypothesis based on absolutely nothing.
No, that's not quite. But the point is, we're not saying that's what it is. I'm not suggesting that's what it is, if it exists. I'm saying what fits the facts best, what fits the existing reports best, and is perhaps the most likely explanation. I'm agree with you fully in terms of Bigfoot. I really find it very difficult to believe that a breeding population of something as impressive as Gigantopithecus could exist in the Pacific Northwest and go almost totally unnoticed all this time. The Himalayas are much more vast. I don't know. I can't even speculate on what it might eat up there. But many other animals do survive up there. Just 1 second. Let me get him first.
There was a journal article in the Journal of Biogeography, I think, or something like that. It was from the University of Illinois, and it was announced in July. And basically, what they were doing was they used software programs to take actual sightings of animals, match them against what they know about the terrain and and predict what the range of that animal would be. And what they did was, to test their software, they put in Bigfoot sightings in North America. And the result that they got for the range corresponded almost exactly to the range of the black bear. Can you comment?
Could I comment on that?
Go ahead.
Well, certainly, I think some Bigfoot sightings probably are bears. I'm convinced of that. The question is, we have if you dismiss, as I'm happy to have Graham do, if you dismiss Bigfoot, and we're probably on pretty much the same page there, you have to say, though, what are people seeing and reporting? And I would just call your attention to this, to a report several years ago in the Netherlands. A little panda escaped from the zoo, and reports went out, look for the little lost panda, and there were ultimately, I think, about 100 panda sightings from all over the Netherlands almost simultaneously. Now, we now know that nobody saw the panda. It went a few yards to the railroad tracks and was killed. A moment of silence for the lost panda. Rightfully so. But you have to ask, what were people seeing? And we get into this idea of psychological contagion. I think when we have an idea, the lake monster, so we see multiple otters as one serpentine creature, or we have an idea of Bigfoot, and we see a bear and we think Bigfoot. People were probably seeing, on some occasions, maybe glimpsing out of the corner of the eye while doing the dishes, they saw maybe a dog cross the corner of the arm at the time they looked, and they thought panda because that was the image du jour. Others saw something else, some good old boys out in the woods. Eventually, the hoaxers, who always get in on these bandwagons, said, let's have another beer, Harry, and let's go call in a panda sighting. But you get this kind of phenomenon, and I think that's also an interesting field for us to study, is the dynamics of seeing things that aren't really there, and yet many times by very sincere people, but they're governed by this sort of idea of something, and it causes them to interpret real things or whatever to that model. Anyway.
Yeah, I definitely think some Bigfoot sightings. When Bigfoot sightings start coming from Texas and Florida and North Carolina and whatnot,
famous Jeannie Scott is back there with a question.
Okay.
Hi, interesting sessions. Parallel conclusions. There's an anthropologist named Grover Krantz who also hypothesized that the Yetis and Bigfoots were related to gigantic Bigfoots back in the 1970s. So we're obviously thinking the same way. The problem with a large-bodied primate is that the only large-bodied primates we know are folivores, or are vegetarians in some fashion. They require an awful lot of bulky food to keep themselves going.
Yeah, I did mention that.
You're talking about the Himalayas. You're talking, especially the remote region of the Himalayas where people really don't live, which is the only place parallel to your Bigfoot argument, where these large populations of large-bodied primates might be able to survive. You're talking about an environment that just does not have that kind of power. So your comment, I think, is very accurate. You don't know what they eat. The problem is there's not a heck of a lot they can eat in those kinds of environments. So I think a lot of your same reasoning, with which I agree, having to do with the unlikelihood of there being Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest, I think you also need to apply to the Himalayas. I think the probability is also very unlikely for Yetis to exist either. But wouldn't it be great if they did?
There is that problem of what it might eat, but then again, animals surprise us at times. There's an awful lot of instances where you say such and such is not possible. Biomechanics indicates that this is not possible, but they find a way. They find a way to accomplish it. Quick note. Then we got to stop here in just a second. I'm not even going to be able to get to this. All right, I'll get to this really quick. This is a classic picture of the Jersey Devil, right? Showing bat wings and this kind of head. This is a hammerhead bat from the Congo region of Africa, which is one of the weirdest bats on the face of the earth. These bats sometimes do strut around on their hind legs like this. You have to drop away the little horsey legs there, but the reports of the Jersey Devil have it killing chickens and grazing on strawberries. And this is a fruit bat. What would it do if you had an escaped captive besides graze on strawberries? They have also been known, this particular fruit bat has also been known to raid chicken coops in Africa. They make very peculiar sounds. They, as you can see, they look very strange, and they can be fairly aggressive. The only problem is the Jersey Devil is said to be 7 or 8 feet tall, and the bat is only like 3. But that same projection applies.
Yeah, let me just jump in real quick with, I did the investigation of the famous Flatwoods Monster case in West Virginia. And the description is just, I mean, almost exactly a description of the West Virginia barn owl, except that is just not big enough. And so either we have, a hitherto unknown species of humongous owl, or an extraterrestrial owl, which is what a lot of people are talking about, owl-like creature. But I mean, right, the sort of heart-shaped face, the terrible claws, the high-pitched hissing sound, it's just barn owl written all over it. In that case, I think maybe the barn owl was perched on a limb before it came aloft, and people just imagined the bottom. They were very vague about the bottom of the creature, so I think that might account for the height there. But the shining eyes, everything, barn owl, and yet describing a creature far larger than the barn owl. And the same with Mothman, same kind of structure.
Owls, I might add, do sometimes attack people. I have personally been attacked by a great horned owl, and believe me, that was not fun.
Terrible claws.
I have a quick philosophical question. Cryptozoology is often trying to get a stronger scientific sort of gravitas. How does it help, or what do you think the value is of hypothesizing creatures that can fit the bill for the descriptions when there's cases like in the river otter case, where the river otter can fit the bill and we know it exists? So what's the value of hypothesizing something completely new versus just waiting for the evidence to come in?
Well, you are just waiting for the evidence to come in the first place. But if you hypothesize something completely new, for example, the worm theory for the Loch Ness. While his otter theory is not bad at all, it doesn't explain some of the things that stick straight up and arc out of the water. The worm might. How would you go looking for it? If it's a balanoglossid worm, it's down in the muck at the bottom. You're going to have to dredge. You're not going to find it any other way. But if you dredge, you might very well come up with some of these things. It tells you where to look. Your case of the Gigantopithecus. As far as the person who said only one time bipedal, I don't think there's much. This animal might have been a knuckle walker. It's not brachiating. There's some interesting reports right now coming out of the Congo about it. What might amount to at least a subspecies of chimpanzee that has turned up, and it's quite a bit larger than the average chimpanzees, and they seem to, they very possibly might at least at times walk bipedally. That's been reported. It's not certain, but that remains to be seen. This is new information just in the last couple of years, and very, very iffy right now. Just that they're very much larger than the normal chimpanzees. They're Tarzan's great apes is what they are. Which is never specified, by the way.
Sorry, our time is up.
Yes, it is.
I regret our time is up. I've just had the best time, and thank you all for being such a good audience. Thank you. Great fun.
I've mentioned to a friend about cryptozoology, and they hadn't heard of it before. Then he said, I know what zoology is, I know what cryptography is, I'm not sure what a combination.
Oh, well, crypto is means hidden or unknown, as in cryptology. And, yes. So it's a good enough term.
Superman is from the planet Krypton.